Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from at AKwx TV to at NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Okay, moving into the first graphic showing the hazardous weather here. Can see quite an area of very high fire danger, and this is in relation to grass, or for grass, out over across Seward Peninsula, Yukon Delta, right up the Yukon River Valley there into the central interior, all the way up to the Yukon Flats. Quite an area of very high fire danger. Again, for grass, and kind of an extreme area right here, maybe around Noaa up toward the Fairbanks area. And then that really diminishes. You head east there, where they've had some recent rainfall up to the northeast and east. And then low fire dangers, of course, here across or south and east of the Alaska Range to the coast, Kodiak Island and the Panhandle. And some medium fire danger for Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Delta, southern Kuskokwim Valley, again for grass. And conditions continue to slowly improve up here on the western north slope, but still some high fire dangers up in there. And for spruce, not quite as bad. Usual area there, as seems to always be the upper Yukon Valley, with very high fire dangers there, as well as in the central interior areas. And moving on to hazardous weather graphics, there are no watches, advisories, or warnings out for the state here through the weekend. Looking pretty good. Otherwise, we got today pretty good low pressure area here over the eastern Gulf of Alaska, and you can see that kind of angling back around, moves northeast and then pulls back to the west a little bit. Pretty good area of moisture here, northeast flow pulling that down, bringing the rain earlier today, light rain into south central Alaska, with showers this afternoon breaking out over the eastern Copper River Basin. Band of moisture up here into the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, and pretty cloudy and rainy for the southeast coast. And up to the north here, some breaks showing up, Kobuk Valley out to the Noatak Valley, and also over in the northern interior areas. Not too bad for the north slope out to the Arctic coast. Also, high pressure making for light winds, dry conditions, some clearing for the Pribilofs today down to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula as well toward Adak. And then all the moisture out here with the system up over the Russian Far East, and that gradually shifting eastward here slowly, especially on the southern part there. That's where the strongest west and northwest winds are, pushing that moisture a little more rapidly here to the east, then up to the north there, and rolling that again. This whole system will gradually shift eastward and bring some rain into the western part of the state, especially in the northwest part, over the weekend. On the chart today, you can see high pressure here centered down over the eastern Aleutians, ridging right up toward the Bering Strait, light winds, and some areas of low clouds and fog here, especially in toward the coastline, maybe a few showers along the right in the mountains of the Alaska Peninsula Aleutian Range. That increased here over the Kuskokwim Valley into the western Alaska Range. Kind of a bent back front here brought that steadier rain earlier today as it kind of pushed southwestward in across south central Alaska, breaking out to showers and hazy sunshine this afternoon. And pretty showery over the Copper River Basin, all those showers ending with some sun breaks over the eastern Copper River Basin today, and the moisture up into the eastern interior. A little bit more in the way of wind and rain here, especially on the north coast of the Panhandle. Lighter amounts down to the south this afternoon, but wet wet day across all of the Panhandle today. Isolated showers up over the Brooks Range area. And for tonight, this moisture edge is eastward here, bringing a chance of rain to St. Lawrence Island late tonight. High pressure edges along the coast. Look for increasing clearing, light winds here across all the western interior areas, and some clearing also up on the north slope there. Isolated showers lingering. Isolated, that's about it here for the Brooks Range. Dry central interior and diminishing showers across southern Alaska, holding on a little bit more over the Alaska Range than elsewhere, but diminishing most areas, drying out Prince William Sound, maybe a little bit of clearing occurring Kodiak Island, and showers continue over the Panhandle, although they'll start to diminish as we'll see on Saturday with some afternoon sunshine, central and northern areas along the North Gulf Coast. Partly to mostly sunny skies tomorrow with a risk of a shower or two, especially over toward Cordova to Yakutat. Interior, a little cloudier with afternoon thunderstorms developing along the Alaska Range and over the eastern interior, maybe up toward the central Brooks Range area. Mostly sunny here in the west under the high pressure area. Same thing for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. And maybe in Alaska could see some sun tomorrow, but Pribilofs probably in some low clouds and fog. Rain with this system slowly advancing eastward there. Definitely a wet day for St. Lawrence Island and increasing rain for the Seward Peninsula on up along the northwest coast there. And then southern Bering Sea under high pressure, pretty good conditions with light winds, dry. Rainfall chances starting to sneak up toward the central Aleutians with the system farther to the south. And that'll make a pretty good jog to the north by Sunday afternoon with that front pushing north of the eastern Aleutians. So rain late tomorrow night or during the night tomorrow night and Sunday morning, breaking out to showers for the eastern Aleutians in the afternoon, but that pushing up toward the Pribilofs in the afternoon hours. High pressure right over the Kuskokwim Delta keeps most of this moisture to the north and trying to direct it eastward there. So periods of rain, western Arctic coast right on down into St. Lawrence Island. Mostly sunny skies, southern Alaska and the interior as well. Risk of a thunderstorm over toward Eagle. And that's about it. Mostly sunny for the southeast coast on Sunday. Lows tonight, 40s to lower 50s over most of southern Alaska, with highs tomorrow, 65 to 70, Copper River Basin, Kuskokwim Valley, Bristol Bay, lower 60s, Kodiak Island with more sunshine, and 60 to 65, south central Alaska, 50s to mid 60s for the Panhandle, followed by lows again in the 40s to lower 50s, and then highs, 68 to 75 for south central Alaska, maybe even some mid 70s showing up around Big Lake and the inland areas of the Kenai Peninsula, mid 70s for the Copper River Basin, 65 to 75 for the Panhandle. And up north, lows 40s and 50s, 30s for the Arctic coast tonight, highs 70s. Eastern interior, of course, cooler out toward the Bering Strait, and then lows 40s and 50s, followed by highs a little bit cooler, 70 to 75 still, but maybe down to near 70 over toward the border. Otherwise, 60s, 40s for the Arctic coast, 38 for Tin City. Southwest coast tonight, lows in the 30s, near 40 elsewhere. Highs tomorrow, 45 to 50 for the Aleutians, 50 to 55 for the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Saturday morning's flying weather showing some IFR here up along the Arctic coast, on down into the southeastern Chukchi Sea, to the north side of the Seward Peninsula, and then toward Kotzebue. Otherwise, a breakthrough here, and then a lot of IFR out over the western Bering Sea. Staying west of Adak, though, so pretty good VFR from Adak into the eastern Aleutians, about the western Alaska Peninsula, all the way up to the southwest coast into the interior, becoming VFR late tonight into early tomorrow morning, and some lingering marginal VFR for the North Gulf Coast Range, also for the Alaska Peninsula. Conditions, a lot of marginal VFR and IFR for the Panhandle, but by the afternoon that clears out. Still have some lower conditions there toward Misty Fjords area with some lingering shower activity there, but really improving for the remainder of the Panhandle. Good VFR, Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, all the way up across the North Slope. Then maybe some marginal VFR along the Arctic coast there in areas with the IFR just off the coast, kind of angling around, clipping Point Hope, Cape Lisburne at the IFR. and probably Tin City down across St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, and then on down to the southwest, a little farther to the west here of Adak than it will be in the morning. So good VFR there from Adak all the way in across southern Alaska. And for Sunday morning, have some IFR here making some headway into the Yukon Delta and staying north of the Pribilofs there, more or less. Marginal VFR for Nunivak Island, IFR through the Bering Strait, southern Seward Peninsula now, and right along the coast of the Arctic up there. And North Slope, all the interior, good VFR, right on down to the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island again. And moving on to Sunday afternoon, IFR kind of retreating back now from what it was in the morning there. Now it's off the Yukon Delta coast with a lot of IFR coming in here to the Aleutians and also up to the eastern Aleutian areas through the Bering Strait, but staying off the Arctic coast there with good VFR here over interior Alaska, all the way down to the North Gulf Coast, and marginal VFR kind of lingering there off the central and south coast of the Panhandle. For passes Saturday, good VFR for Anaktuvik, and Adigan looking good as well with VFR flying there. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, both those passes, and windy, rainy, same forecast, as well as windy, both looking good. And the Eastern Alaska Range too, good VFR flying there for Isabel and Mintasta. And for the eastern Matanuska Valley area, we've got good VFR for Tanita and Chilkoot, or I'm sorry, Portage VFR, as well as Chilkoot and White VFR flying as well for Saturday, probably Sunday as well. And for the freezing levels, upper level high pressure trying to build over the central interior, so that's going to boost the freezing levels up to about 8,000 feet there. Cooler air over the northern Bering Sea with that upper trough back over the Russian Far East here, so 4,000 to 6,000 feet rises to 8,000 to 10,000 feet over the Aleutians. And moving on to icing, nothing really significant over much of mainland Alaska, maybe some lingering mixed icing there, the light variety over the southern Panhandle with lingering shower activity. And then this area slowly moving eastward could spread some increased threats of icing, light rime icing, very isolated, moderate if at all, for the Seward Peninsula on down to St. Lawrence Island area. Otherwise, Bering Sea pretty much icing free, as well as interior Alaska. And for the jet stream, upper level low here over the Russian Far East, so good 65 to 80 knot winds back here, but kind of splits here as it approaches the coastline, diminishing from the southwest along the northwest coast, northwest flow across the Alaska Peninsula, offshore northeast flow here for the northern Panhandle, 9,000 feet, same thing, light northeast winds there with the high pressure in over southern Alaska, low pressure down off the south coast, and then 40 to 50 knot winds here with this system up over the Russian Far East, staying west of the forecast area, and 3,000 feet, 40 knot southwest winds through the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula, also approaching the southwest coast here, right across the Pribilofs, looking at maybe 30 to 40 knot winds there, otherwise light and variable the remainder of the state. And looking at turbulence, isolated moderate turbulence here, western or Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and the central Aleutian areas, as well as Kodiak Island, maybe back to the Aleutian Range, mechanical turbulence there, especially for smaller aircraft.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse, we're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The Western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles and nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. The nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the U.S., we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Marine forecast here for the south coast, south to southeast winds 15 knots for the day Saturday. And the central coast here, easterlies at about 15 to 20 knots, and the north coast east 10 to 15. Lincoln Island, Glacier Bay, light south winds tomorrow at around 10 knots. But gale warnings there for Stevens Passage, east 35 knots, and then southeast 20 or southeast 15 for Clarence Strait. And for Sunday, central and south coast, northwest winds at 20 knots with 7 to 8 foot seas. North coast, west-northwest at 15. Lynn Canal, northwest at 10. Same thing for Stevens Passage, northwesterlies on the light side at about 10 knots. And Clarence Strait, looking at a northwest wind at 15 knots with 3 foot seas. North Gulf Coast tomorrow, variable winds 15 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. Prince William Sound, light variable winds at 10 knots with 2 foot seas. Northern Cook Inlet, or all of Cook Inlet, south to southwest at 20 knots with 5 foot seas. Southwest 20 for Kamishak Bay, southwest 15 for the Barren Islands. And for Sunday, Cook Inlet, southwesterlies at about 10 knots with 3 foot seas. And Kamishak Bay, west winds at 20 knots. Same thing for Barren Islands, west winds 20 knots, seas in both areas there at about 5 feet. And for the North Gulf Coast, western North Gulf Coast, westerlies at 20 knots. Otherwise, for the eastern areas, variable to west at 10 to 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. Prince William Sound, variable to northwesterlies, continue light at 10 knots with seas 2 feet. Kodiak Island, southwest to northwest winds at 25 knots with 6 foot seas. And for the Alaska Peninsula, variable to west-northwest winds, 10 to 20 knots. Bristol Bay, west winds at 25 knots, seas 7 feet. And for the day Sunday for Bristol Bay, southeast at 15, seas 3 feet. Alaska Peninsula, east to southeast winds 15 to 25 knots. And Kodiak Island, southwest winds at 20 knots with 5-foot seas. Eastern Aleutians tomorrow, east winds 20 to 25 knots, seas running 3 to 8 feet. Central Aleutians, small craft advisories east to 25. And then for the western Aleutians here, kind of a south to southeast breeze at 15 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas. Then on Sunday, western Aleutians, north to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots. Adak and Atka, a little bit stronger, small craft advisories there, northeast 25 to 30 knots, seas as high as 12 feet. Eastern Aleutians, east winds 30 knots, seas 7 to 13 feet. And for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, southwest winds at 20 knots for the day Saturday. Yukon Delta Coast and St. Lawrence Island looking at south winds at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Pribilof south at 20, seas 5 feet. St. Matthew Island, small craft advisories south at 25. And for the day on Sunday, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, southwest at 20, south 20 for the Yukon Delta Coast, light west winds at 10 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, and northeast at 20 for the Pribilof. St. Matthew Island, south winds 15 knots with seas at 7 feet. And for the Arctic coast tomorrow, east winds 15 knots in the Chukchi Sea here, south winds 15 to 20 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas. And for the day on Sunday, let's see, the eastern central Arctic coast, even the west side here, mostly east winds at mostly around 15 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea, Wales up to Cape Beaufort, south to southeast winds at about 20 knots with seas running at 4 feet. And for tonight, again, high pressure building along the coast here, really controlling much of the Aleutian chain here with dry conditions and light winds. Could be a few showers with this light northwest flow, mostly right in the Aleutian range there on up, kind of picking up in the Alaska range. Showers on the decrease slowly, but still kind of mostly cloudy, showery night for southern Alaska. Dry in the central interior, risk of a shower in the Brooks Range. Showers likely for the Panhandle. And those start to dry out with some clearing over the northern southeast coast tomorrow, but lingering showers down south. Scattered afternoon thunderstorms over the central and eastern interior with increasing sunshine here for south central Alaska. And especially out here in the west as that high pressure ridge moves in, rain moves in across the Bering Sea and into the northwest interior on Sunday afternoon.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.